Good morning, I'm Maddie Jansen, and this is the podcast of 17 News at Sunrise. It's everything you need to know to start your day in about 15 minutes.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning. For the seventh consecutive night, demonstrators took to the streets of downtown Bakersfield protesting the death of George Floyd and others. What police had to say about last night's gathering.
The May jobs report is expected out this morning in 30 minutes, and economists think we could see unemployment near 20%. But there's a silver lining to what could be coming in June.
Plus, turning protest into policy, how lawmakers are coming together to address police reform in the wake of the nationwide upheaval. I'll look at some of the changes they want to make on this Friday, June 5th, 2020. Good morning. Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Maddie Jansen here at home, and a big change this morning. People are probably going to notice. Kevin Shred and Alex Fisher both in studio as the slow migration back to the studio begins.
Yeah, I think Kevin is. I have never seen Kevin so excited. I mean, he got dressed up this morning. He was in early this morning.
I couldn't sleep.
It was the first day of school.
It was like a kid on the first day of school, how they couldn't sleep the night before. That was me last night. I was so excited to come back home. So I don't even know if I know how to use a green wall anymore. So we'll see how that goes.
I was going to say, I think you'll have to bear with Kevin as he goes to his graphics and tries to figure out where things are because, I mean, Maddie, I got to tell you, you didn't see this earlier, but Kevin already had a difficult time trying to get into his computer because he forgot his password.
I don't remember the password.
Well, I was going to say, I bet you forgot it, right?
Yeah, I did. So I'm going to have IT reset that for me today. And it's like being a new employee. So let's get to the forecast. And it was hot yesterday. Temperatures were not at 105, so that was a good thing. We had 103. Normally, again, 88 is the normal high for this time of year. And our record, well, we didn't want to reach that because it'd just be a little too hot for us. And that is 107, set back in 2016. Now, take a look at the satellite and radar, and there are some clouds drifting in from the southwest, and that is going to continue as we go throughout today. Now, we've got 75 degrees out there. It's still quite warm. That cooler air will filtrate in throughout the day. A north-northwest wind at 7 right now. Here's a look at the hour-by-hour forecast, starting out in those 70s and then progressing into the mid-80s by this afternoon. Tehachapi sitting at 61. We've got a calm wind out there, and you can see hour by hour here, starting out in the 60s, rising into the 70s throughout the afternoon. I'll have much more in your forecast coming up in just a little bit. Maddie, over to Tehachapi.
All right, thanks so much, Kevin. It's 5:02 now, and we begin with a late-night crash that killed 2 people in Bakersfield. It happened around 11:30 last night. CHP says a driver on Ming Avenue lost control and crashed into a fence at the intersection of South Union Avenue. Both victims, a man and woman, were found outside the car. It's unclear if either of the victims was driving. CHP says it's possible someone else drove the car but ran away after the crash. The investigation continues.
The first of several memorials for George Floyd was held in Minneapolis yesterday. The response to his death has been a mixture of grief and anger from those who knew him. NBC's Dan Shinneman has more.
The demonstrations go on. Another night of outrage over the death of George Floyd.
Amazing grace.
Followed a day of remembering Floyd's life.
It's crazy, man. All these people came to see my brother, and that's amazing to me that he touched so many people's hearts.
Family, friends, and mourners gathered in Minneapolis to remember the man who has been lost.
When he would wrap his arms around you, you would just feel like, you were, everything could just go away.
Praise God. While Floyd was honored, so were the feelings stirred up by his death.
And when I looked this time and saw marches where in some cases young whites outnumbered the blacks marching, I know that it's a different time and a different season.
A service fueled with emotion ended in silence. 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence, the time George Floyd was pinned under a police officer's knee.
George Floyd should not be among the deceased.
10 days after George Floyd took his last breath, his family and his community are saying goodbye. Dan Sheneman, NBC News.
And another memorial is scheduled for this weekend in North Carolina. And then next week, there will be a public viewing and funeral in Houston.
Your time now is 5:05. For the 7th consecutive day, demonstrators took to the streets of downtown Bakersfield protesting Floyd's death. It started with a candlelight vigil and prayer for George Floyd outside Bakersfield Police Headquarters. Organizer Joseph Castro said he and his faith group, United We Stand, wanted to convey a message of unity.
But we take a moment and have a moment of silence and remember why we're doing this and bring in the community, the protesters coming over here and taking a knee, putting their signs down. It was just amazing. It was a blessing to see.
BPD says other protests happen on Buena Vista, or another group rather, called The Next Step, led at least 100 people in a march around downtown before returning to the BPD building.
I don't know why the color of my skin gives people the reason to hate me. And if you don't see my skin, you don't see who I am. You don't see my culture, you don't see my history, you don't see my music, you don't see my dance, you don't see anything about me.
BPD says other protests happened on Buena Vista Road and at the Mesa Verde Detention Center. Both ended without any incidents.
Meanwhile, the department is on rumor control this morning. BPD says there has been posts going around on social media warning about possible riots or looting in certain neighborhoods or businesses. The department says none of those rumors have been true. BPD had acknowledged that there have been break-ins and stealing, but it has no evidence those suspects are linked to any of the protests. Plus, it has already made several arrests. BPD says if you ever doubt something you see online, just ask them to check it out. Don't share it if you don't know whether it's real.
BPD, meantime, is still investigating after a protester was hit by a car Wednesday night. The man is said to be in critical condition. He was hit while protesters were walking down California Avenue near Oak Street, according to BPD. Officers say the protesters were in both lanes of traffic when a man headed east hit one of them. The driver was taken in for questioning but released. BPD says it has no evidence that the driver intentionally hit the protester or was driving recklessly. Since then, there have been several protests or posts on social media claiming the driver did hit the protester on purpose and that officers on scene did not act appropriately. BPD released a statement that reads in part, BPD surrounded the driver to keep him safe from the crowd of protesters who were emotionally charged, and it is BPD's job to keep all community members safe. You can read the full statement on our website, kget.com.
President Trump visits a coronavirus testing site in Maine later today. It is his second public appearance since the controversial clearing of peaceful demonstrators for his walk to a D.C. church. Tracy Potts has more.
Across the nation, officers taking a knee, peaceful protest, and violence. In Chicago, a family pulled from their car, roughed up by police.
We will hold people accountable who cross the line.
In New York, where thousands followed George Floyd's brother across the Brooklyn Bridge, a police officer was stabbed, 2 others shot.
They're trying to keep themselves safe because the police want to go home to their families.
President Trump's plan to meet protesters with military force opposed by a growing chorus of former military leaders. Retired Marine General John Allen, former Joint Chiefs of Staff Mike Mullen, and Martin Dempsey.
Our military was not trained for that purpose.
It's really time that we said, no, our active duty forces should not be employed in a situation to crush peaceful protesters.
On Capitol Hill, some Republicans remain silent.
Can we ask you a couple of questions? No. Do you agree with Mattis that the president is a threat?
And phone call.
General Mattis.
I've got to get to.
Okay.
Others praising former Defense Secretary James Mattis for his op-ed accusing President Trump of dividing the country.
He's an American patriot. He's an individual whose judgment I respect.
By just blaming the president, he's only looking at half of the equation.
As Democrats mark the 8 minutes and 46 seconds George Floyd laid under an officer's knee, they're also planning hearings on police brutality.
Alaska Republican Lisa Murkowski says she's rethinking whether to support the president's reelection because of his response to these demonstrations. The president responded on Twitter that in 2 years he'd be in Alaska, opposing her too. Tracy Potts, NBC News.
Time now is 5:10 and still ahead on Sunrise. A look at the new normal.
See how a popular restaurant has made changes after reopening. Welcome back now to the latest coronavirus numbers in Kern County. Public Health reported 44 new cases along with 5 deaths yesterday. 2,472 people have now tested positive for the virus in Kern. 45 people have died. More than half of those were people living in local nursing facilities. 55 people are hospitalized for COVID-19. Over 1,600 people have recovered. More than 27,000 tests have come back negative, while more than 800 tests are still pending. A COVID-19 testing site has closed down. The site at the Richard Prado Center in Northeast Bakersfield took its last appointments on Wednesday. The plan now is to bring its drive-through testing to the Kern County Fairgrounds instead. Officials say that will be a more centralized location that is expected to start on Monday, and you will be able to schedule appointments on the county website.
5:20 is your time now. A concern we keep hearing is how the large police brutality protests could affect the fight against COVID-19. At yesterday's public health briefing, Director Matt Constantine commented on the prospects for a spike in COVID cases locally.
As we have said with all types of activities, wearing a face covering is strongly recommended, especially when you can't keep that distance. So it will be interesting to watch as different industries open up and if the protests have any impact to our numbers. But it's a good reminder that we all need to be cautious no matter what our daily activities are.
It takes anywhere from 2 to 14 days for an infected person to exhibit symptoms. Constantine also said that if there is another outbreak, it could impact the progress that Kern County has made in reopening its economy. Well, how different will your next dinner be out at a restaurant? After the break, we'll see how a local diner is adjusting to this new normal.
KGET Business Watch is brought to you by Grapevine MSP Technology Services, the Valley's leading IT service provider.
Welcome back. It is 5:24. Delano is set to lose its JCPenney store. The company announced yesterday it's closing more than 150 stores nationwide. JCPenney says it made the decision after reviewing its retail footprint. The department store filed for bankruptcy protection during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it was already struggling financially and had closed more than 240 locations before the pandemic. Store closing sales begin June 12th. And another piece of Bakersfield returns this morning. Pyrenees Cafe will reopen at 8 a.m. The restaurant has been closed since April because of COVID-19. According to a Facebook post, they have used the time to remodel a bit and also spaced out tables for physical distancing. And because they're reducing their capacity, they recommend you reserve a table ahead of time.
5:24 is your time now. As businesses look to begin to open back up, one local buffet is bringing innovation to its age-old traditions. This morning, 17's Taylor Schaub takes us inside Hodell's Country Dining, a Kern County staple that has revised their decades-old buffet service in the name of safety.
For more than 2 weeks, we've been telling you about the changes restaurants have had to make as they prepare to reopen. Well, Hodell's Country Dining is chief among the establishments making major changes. It's Kern County comfort food at its finest. Hodell's Country Dining, home to some of the best buffet service Bakersfield has to offer. But as the dining restaurant reopens for the first time in 2 months, Owner Don Hodel says the place is going to look a little different.
We wanted to get back in the game, and so we did.
New regulations have forced the more than 50-year-old buffet to adapt to the challenges of modern day.
When you come in, obviously things are going to be different.
Upon arrival, diners will notice a couple of distinct differences. Masks now required for every worker, as well as sanitation stations provided throughout the restaurant.
You know, we have 1 foot in the brake, 1 foot on the accelerator.
On the buffet side, no longer the self-service. Instead, servers will plate your food for you. Also, menu items like the famed salad bar closed off, and trips to the line are limited.
We decided to give 2 plates, 1 trip. So get your seconds while you get your firsts, and we have a tray. And what that does, that eliminates the number of contact for social distancing.
Danny Scott has been a regular at Hodel's for more than 30 years. He says he doesn't mind the new precautions.
They are trying to do everything it is that they can, period.
So I decided to try my hand at the new look buffet. As you can see, the line moves pretty fast, and there's still lots of good old American grub. And once you get through the buffet line, it's really all the same. You get all the meats, all the rice, all the potatoes, and all the salad you want. So while it's not exactly where Hodel would like it just yet, he wants you to know the staff is working around the clock to make sure your next Sunday brunch mirrors the days of old.
Be patient with us. We're learning as we go. We will streamline it. And I would love to be able to, let people come back as often as they want.
The eatery will be open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as full takeout service. In Southwest Bakersfield, Taylor Schaub, 17 News.